Hello and welcome to episode 26 of 50 Women Over 50, a podcast for women whose personal confidence is born of experience. I'm your host, Sherrilynne Starkie. In this podcast series, I'm interviewing 50 women from all walks of life who are over 50 years of age about what they've learned by this decade so that we can all learn from them. And today, I'm welcoming to the show a woman I've known as a collaborator and I've admired as a strategist and business owner. But until this interview, I didn't really know her very well personally. Please welcome Corien Kershey, owner of Brand Clarity, a successful management consulting firm that puts the brand at the center of strategy and whose clients include many household names and public sector organizations. In this interview, she discussed being a cancer survivor, the loneliness of becoming a widow, the continuing joy of motherhood and of becoming a grandmother. She also brings her unique feminist slant and pragmatism to life over 50. Okay, let's get started. All right, so tell me about your 50th birthday.
I don't really remember my 50th birthday. I have a good friend whose birthday is right around the same time, and mutual friends usually throw this small dinner party, and that's probably what happened. If I had to pick that milestone moment that marks the start of your 50s, it was probably 1 year later, 2 years later. When I was 52, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Oh, I have not know that.
Yes, and I was fortunate. It hadn't spread, but they didn't get everything the first time, so I had to go through 2 surgeries, radiation. Fortunately, I avoided chemo. When it was all over on June 6, 2010, my husband and I threw an It's Over party.
Oh, nice.
Still known as the Pink Party.
Right.
And we must have had like well over 100 people there. People I hadn't seen since my university days came. Men who I didn't think would ever wear pink for money, wore it for love. And rumor has it people even were wearing pink underwear and pink bras and pink socks. And so I sort of marked that as the start of my 50s.
And were you able to work through all that process or were you off work?
Oh, well, now there's an interesting question. So my 50s the start of my 50s were quite turbulent. So we had the breast cancer happen, and then I was working for HBS, and the owner wanted to retire. And so there was a whole setup and agreement and process where 3 of us were going to take over the agency, buy him out over time through profits. Yeah. And right then the sort of that aftershock of the recession started to hit.
Yeah.
The banks all went squirrely. The agency closed. And so what I thought was going to be my business future for the next 25 years suddenly poof, went up in smoke.
Right.
Yeah, I did keep working. If I hadn't kept working, I think I would have gone insane. I think I took maybe 2 or 3 days off after each surgery just to get over the anesthetic.
Yeah.
But otherwise, no, I just kept working. I have to keep working. Otherwise, I spend far too much time in my own head.
Right.
And that is never a good thing for me.
Yeah, I think you and I are a bit the same like that. So in your illness in your 50s, did that mask the menopause then? Or were you coping with both things going on at the same time?
I was coping with things going on at the same time. My cancer was a typical menopause estrogen receptor cancer. It was one of the things that came out of menopause. And I did not have a bad time at all with menopause. I had a little bit of hot flash going on, but I subsequently asked my family, what was I like over those 2 or 3 years? And what I got back was really fine. No difference. And I didn't think there would be. I have never accepted your hormones as a reason for bad behavior. And when women say, oh, well, I'm sorry, I'm bitchy, I have PMS, it's just, well, there's another reason why women shouldn't be in control of the red button. The word hysteria, the word hysteria has the same root as hysterectomy.
Yeah.
Right? What the medical community saw as hysteria back in the Victorian age, they attributed to the effects of the brain on the uterus.
Uh-huh.
And I now read all this stuff about PMS and how suddenly menopause has become the cause of the age. And I just go back to, okay, so yeah, we're all controlled by our uterus and our ovaries, then, are we? We can't rise above that. It infuriates me. How can we possibly move forward as women if we constantly point to our reproductive organs as the reason why this and the reason why that? No, 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 no. You don't point at your liver for bad behavior. You don't point at your stomach for choices you make. But somehow we use our uterus and our ovaries as the excuse for this. The language that's being used is one of liberation. I think you're playing right back into Victorian assumptions that women are so controlled by their uterus that they are incapable of clear thought or calm behavior.
Well, I agree with you 100% on this. And I've got two things to say about that. The first thing is when I was running an agency and staff members used to tell me the reason why something had happened or didn't happen was because of PMS. I used to find that extremely frustrating because like the second thing is, and I've only just recently learned this, so that's why I was thinking about it, was, were you aware that the Victorians invented the vibrator to keep women's hysteria under control?
Well, they got that part right.
Yes, a couple of episodes ago, I interviewed Anne Bell, who is a sex therapist. So I've started following her in social, and she posted something about that. And I just thought, I'm just kind of like to see some guy on his workbench working this out. I got to get my wife under control.
Oh, I absolutely love that.
Thing about life after 50 that was a big surprise for you?
My life has a habit of changing every 10 years.
Right.
Radically changing. And I don't know why, but it always happens on the twos, more or less.
Okay.
My son was born when I was 32. I remarried when I was 42. Well, I got breast cancer when I was 52. And my husband died suddenly, and I mean suddenly, when I was 62.
Oh.
So every oh yes, it was one of those wake up, honey, you're late for your appointment.
Oh.
Things. And so my life changes radically, almost always on the twos. And I was sort of prepared for a change when I went into my 50s because I knew it was almost going to be inevitable. Mm-hmm. But I hadn't expected that it would be negative.
Right.
So the breast cancer threw me for a loop. Just while I was having treatments, in between surgeries, I dislocated my hip.
Oh my God.
And it didn't go back. So I was on a waiting list for hip surgery. I had to wait for a year. So I hobbled through that pink party. Mm. When that finally got fixed, it was like a huge blessing. So there was a bit of there was sort of a sense of rebirth as I went into my 50s. I beat the breast cancer. I had a brand new hip, which was golden. I started going out on my own because HBS had collapsed, and that was working out well. The 50s were kind of a decade of regroup for me. It was not a decade of preparing for a grand future. It was a decade of get back on your feet.
Right.
Right. And my husband, who was a serial entrepreneur, bless his heart, was always sort of working for air and hope. So
you needed to keep working.
I had to keep working. Yeah.
What advice would you give your 30-year-old self if you could?
Oh, what a good question. Think about what it is you want and what you want to be. So probably unlike a lot of the women you interview for the podcast, I'm a boomer.
Right. Yes.
Not the next generation. And I think we were still raised on this kind of in the air belief that yes, men and women have an equal relationship, but when push comes to shove, right, the woman kind of follows a little bit. So I ended up in a career and a life where things happened as opposed to me making deliberate choices.
Okay.
Right? Being deliberate about what I wanted to do or being deliberate about what I wanted to be. So a lot of the choices that I made were predicated by what my husband at the time wanted. So I've been married twice. And so in both cases, where I ended up was because I was willing to accommodate what my husband wanted.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so here I sit now, a widow, much like your Rita Rich, I think a previous podcaster, widowed and suddenly going, my life is my own now, and I don't really know what to do with it.
Right.
Right. I've never not been in a relationship, not since like early high school. So I suddenly look around me and think, wow, all these things that I wish I could have done, but I can't start now.
Why not?
Well, I don't think at my age I'm going to go take a degree in veterinary medicine or get a law degree or...
You know what? You need to listen to the episode with Norma Dunning. She only had high school. At the age 50, she went to university and did her undergraduate. In 9 years, she had her PhD. She's now a university lecturer at the Alberta University and a celebrated author. And like when she was 50, there's no way she could have seen into her future. And she's in her mid 60s now too.
Well, that's an interesting analogy. In my 20s, I spent all of my 20s and half of my 30s in university. Mm-hmm. So I ended up with 4 degrees, and including a PhD from the University of Toronto. And I was poised at the time to become a tenured professor.
Yeah.
My husband also had a PhD.
Yeah.
In the same subject.
Oh, I see.
In the same subject. And so there was this incredible, and this was not him. It wasn't his tension. He's actually my first husband was a very laid back individual. I don't think this would really have occurred to him, but there was this problem that at the time I could have gotten tenure anywhere because I was a woman.
Yes.
And and I have to admit, the far better scholar than I, could not.
So he got the job and you didn't?
No, it was the other way around. He was up for numerous ones, but in every case he lost to a woman.
But why didn't you become a tenured academic?
Because it would have meant moving every year, doing sessionals until I got tenure. And at the time, it still is. That's the way academic life goes. You get a PhD and then you start doing the sessional circuit. So you move every year, maybe every 2 years to another university all over North America.
Right, right.
And it was not a lifestyle I wanted. It was certainly not a lifestyle he wanted. And then we realized at the end of the day that unless he could suddenly magically suckle children, the separation of duty. I mean, unfortunately, biology is a harsh mistress.
It is.
It is a very harsh mistress. And so when that child arrives, your priorities change. And I think as a woman, they change even more. We kind of decided that I should not pursue tenure, but he should, even though it's going to take longer and be far more difficult.
Right.
But what I tell my, to be more deliberate and to be more deliberate in those choices and not end up suddenly at 66 a widow and going, gee, what do I do with my life? Suddenly it's mine and I don't know what to do with it. And the other thing I would tell my 30-year-old self is your body's not going to last forever. So start thinking now about what's going to break when you get into your 60s and start taking care of that now. I'm increasingly dismayed that suddenly it's almost like somebody told my body, okay, you're 65, you can start breaking down now.
Yeah.
So,
who's that movie star that said getting old isn't for sissies? I think it was Clint Eastwood says that.
I believe it. My father always he would always say, he'd pull his face and he'd say, I hate this. And I would point out that the alternative was not great either, but he lived till he was 95 and always had this remarkably positive attitude to everything.
Conceivably, you've got 30 years left to ramble around on this planet. Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
I would like to audit. I'm not sure. I don't really want this the stress again of tests and writing theses. And I've done that so many times. I prop my doors open with all my theses. I don't want to do that again, but I would love to audit a fine arts degree.
Okay.
Particularly art history.
Yeah.
Might audit a degree in art history. Not actually have the degree. I don't need another one, but I would like to take all the courses and do that. So that is still something I'm considering. I have 2 grandchildren now. So in 10 years, I see myself probably living much closer to my son and family. They're 4.5 hours away in Whitby right now.
Yeah.
But I am working with him. One of the things I'm doing is he's a veterinarian. And he has its own sort of very unique kind of consulting business. It's doing super well, but they don't teach business in veterinary college.
Yes.
At all. And he's a specialist, so we have to do 4 extra years to become an internal medicine specialist. I'm helping him with his business, bringing a little bit of my business experience to the table for him. So that's a lot of fun, and I hope I can keep doing that. Although I do keep telling him, when I'm 72, I cannot vouchsafe how well my brain will work.
I think you're going to be fine. What are you doing for fun these days?
Working on a veterinary business. Why do you ask? I don't know. That's one of the things I need to work out. When my husband died, the pandemic started. Almost at the same time, a couple of months apart.
Okay.
And suddenly I was grieving, frantically worried about money, and isolated.
Yeah. No,
because
I had no idea that was going on. I'm sorry.
Well, the company that my husband founded was Spartan Bioscience, but what was looking like a significant and worthwhile investment of the last 15 years collapsed.
Yes.
And sort of in a hugely imperfect storm. Yeah, so I had the isolation and the grief and watching Spartan go down. And so when I came out of that, it was just more about keeping my head above water emotionally and not really about having fun.
Before we recorded this call today, you'd mentioned to me that you're interested in taking cooking courses. Do you think that's something you might do?
Yeah, I've always wanted to take a course at Le Cordon Bleu.
Yes.
And I have to admit, I was far more interested in doing it when I had a husband and a child at home. And now I look at this and think, am I going to do all that for myself?
Why not?
Well, I still may out of interest, but I also volunteer, which I do enjoy. Yeah. I'm on the board of Family Services Ottawa, which does a wonderful job doing mental health counseling and family support. So I'm really enjoying that. And then I'm also looking at I'd be interested in more hands-on. Yeah. So one area I'm looking at is Ottawa Little Theatre. I've always been sort of on the fringes of theater. My PhD thesis was on dramaturgy in Ben Jonson, not the runner, the playwright. Okay. And I think that would be kind of fun. And before all hell broke loose, I was a volunteer driver for the Cancer Society. Right. So I would pick up people at their homes, drive them to their appointments or their treatments, wait for them and drive them home. Yeah. I really enjoy I miss doing hands-on volunteering.
Yeah. Is there anything that you're reading or watching that you'd like to recommend?
I joined a virtual book club.
Nice.
A little less than a year ago now, and I was a little trepidatious at first. We're all in different places. Some of them are in PEI, some are in Nova Scotia, some are in Toronto, and some are in Ottawa, although I think I'm the only Ottawa. So right now we're reading The Finkler Question. It's a reread for me. It won the Man Booker in, I think, 2014, 2015.
Okay.
It is... I would highly recommend it. It is witty. It's wryly funny. It's very intelligently written. And it's a very sort of serious but tongue-in-cheek exploration of what it means to be Jewish. What is the appeal of Jewishness to non-Jewish people? So Finkler is a character in the book, but he also becomes the epitome of that ambivalent Jew. The Jew who's a Jew, but not a Jew.
Okay.
right? What we call culturally Christian,
Okay.
right? I don't really believe in any of it, but I do Christmas. So I'm enjoying rereading that. I'm also a Louise Penny fan, so I'm reading her latest. And do you know Peter Cleveland?
He's local, isn't he?
Yes, he's had a long career he was head of Ernst Young here
Okay.
in Ottawa for
That's
a long
why
time.
that's why I'm connected to him. Yeah.
And then he's written several very successful business books for entrepreneurs and business leaders. Now he's turned his mind to fiction.
Right.
And he's just released his second book called Gobsmacked.
Yes. I've seen him promoting it on LinkedIn. So
Yes.
you're enjoying it.
So I'm reading that as well.
Oh,
so
you're busy with your
I read the first one and it was pretty good. And besides, I'll support Peter in anything he does. So
I wish him luck.
But you look at Canadian writers like, let's say, Miriam Taves, whose book Women Talking racked up a few good Academy Awards, including Best Adapted Screenplay. So, that she's certainly a full-time writer and writing in a very, well, not niche, but she writes about the experience of women in Mennonite prairie culture. And her books always are about that constant tension of being in the world, but not in the world of those kinds of religious sects and cultures. And Women Talking is very much about the hidden abuses that occur in those kinds of religious communities and the powerlessness of women in those situations and what it takes to take that power back and then act on it.
Okay, that one's definitely going in the show notes. I think I need to read this book. It sounds really good.
Yeah, I admit I have not read it, but I love Miriam Taves' work, so I've done some looking into it, and it's definitely on my list. But it really is about that. How do you take power back when you're powerless, and the beliefs and the Bible are what's used as the excuse to make you powerless. It's justified. Yes, we could have a whole other podcast about religion and the damage it's done to women, but that's another story.
It needs to keep us in our place, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. You're right. That's a whole different podcast. So let me ask you, is there an app that you're not willing to live without?
Several.
Okay. What's your favorite?
Hard to say. I'm going to sort of mention three if I can, or if we have time.
No, please. Yeah.
So I'm an idiot. I've been watching this Spotify thing forever going, what is this? What is this? What is this? And I kind of said, well, it's sort of music on tap. So I said, okay. So I asked for it for Christmas, and I don't know why I have waited so long. Yeah. I'm just absolutely delighted with the thing. It's eye-opening. I thought, how could I have not been aware of the joys of Spotify? That is certainly one. The second is the Economist app.
Okay.
I don't get the paper, like the magazine. I just don't want to kill trees to that extent. But I do have the online, and with it comes this app that changes every day. It's my go-to. We live in a fog of misinformation, and it's kind of my beacon of fact.
Okay.
If not truth, at least fact. It's objective. It's it has a very worldly perspective.
And you said there was a third app.
There is. After my husband died, I had a lot of trouble sleeping. That the scene plays out in your mind's eye over and over and over again. Yes. Walking into the room, and anyway, so I had a lot of trouble sleeping, and somebody recommended an app called Insight Timer.
Okay.
And they have a free version, bless their hearts. I listen to that every night, and I fall asleep listening to it. It's incredibly relaxing, and it's almost like if I travel somewhere and I don't have my headphones with me, the little ones I use to listen to that, I'm all upset. It's like I don't have my sleeping pills with me.
Oh, yes.
So
I feel like you're like the fourth podcast guest that said something similar. Not that precise app, but some kind of guided meditation app. Yeah. Is there anything I haven't asked you about that you'd like to share?
I would love to hear in 10 years what some of your guests made of their 50s when they are at the perspective of 66.
This has been 50 Women Over 50, a podcast for women whose personal confidence is born of experience. I want to thank my guest, brand strategist and community volunteer, Corien Kershey, for joining me today and sharing so generously the story of her journey, her struggles, and her view of today's world. Please see the show notes to find out more about Corien and her business. I've included links so that you can connect with her online. And join me again for next week's show when I will welcome award-winning author Rona Maynard, whose new memoir, Starter Dog, is featured on the cover of Reader's Digest this month. That's next week. But in the meantime, please drop me a rating or a review on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps other people find the podcast, so I appreciate your support. Let's connect and create a whole community of wise women over 50 by sharing a link to this show with your friends and connections. See you next time on 50 Women Over 50. I'm your host, Sherrilynne Starkie.